Hi everyone. We're just having that influx of people joining now. So yeah, just give us 30 seconds whilst everybody's computers catches up into the chat. Hi everyone. We're just waiting for teams to catch up. There's yeah, quite a lot of people registered, so they're just all flowing into the meeting now. So hope you're all having a good Thursday afternoon. Great. Okay. I think we're going to have a few extra joiners, but I will get started. So yeah, hi everybody. So welcome to this webinar about the future of AI and social value, exploring a bunch of areas, including local needs and impact. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, my colleague Neil is just going to trigger a little poll just to get a little sort of sense check of what your thoughts are, which will happen in the background whilst we get going. A quick note about us. So this is the team at Impact Reporting. It's nearly Christmas, so we dug out a Christmas image. So yeah, we are a software company. We make a social value tracking piece of software called Impact Reporting. So I think we're relatively well placed to understand like the intersection of social value and technological advances like AI. My name is Matt Haworth. I'm one of the co-founders of Impact Reporting and also a social enterprise called Reason Digital. Now, I know there's a lot of kind of misinformation and fakery on there on the internet about AI. So I want to promise you that absolutely everything you're going to see today is 100% fact-checked, verified, and real with no adulterations whatsoever. Before we dive right in, I just want to make an important distinction for you about two kinds of AI. So yeah, what we're going to talk about today is something called predominantly generative AI, but I wanted to just make sure we're all on the same page with that. So what you can see on screen now is a really good example of the difference between discriminative AI and generative AI, and perhaps more than that, it's absolutely terrifying as well. So what you've got here at the top is a bunch of images that were shown to people in an MRI scanner, and an artificial intelligence algorithm was run on those brain scans, and it basically figured out what areas of their brain were activated when looking at different images or different kinds of features in images. So we call that discriminative AI. That's where we use AI to pattern match. And AI like that's been around since the like 70s and 80s. You've probably used some of it today already if you've used, I don't know, Google Maps or listened to a Spotify playlist or whatever. Then we've got generative AI. So the images that you can see at the bottom there is an image generation AI. So an AI that knows how to create pictures, that has used that brain scan data to try and guess what the person is looking at. So what we have here is like an early example of kind of AI mind reading, which I think is like absolutely amazing and utterly terrifying. But it's a good example of the two different kinds of AI. AI to help spot patterns, which can be useful in social value data analysis, of course, and AI that can generate things, which can be equally useful too, as we will see. Most of you, I imagine, have probably used ChatGPT. And this has been the big kind of innovation that's made everybody talk about AI. Well, why has this happened all of a sudden? If AI has been around since the kind of 70s or 80s, where has this kind of come from? Well, it's all come out of an invention in 2017, which I'm absolutely not going to explain because it's super boring maths. But it's important that we understand that what generative AI is, all it is actually just a big blob of clever maths. And what that math does, if we're thinking about large language models, that is things like ChatGPT that are designed to have like a chat interface or be able to generate text, is all they can do for us really is predict the next most likely word in a sentence. And I want to explain this to you because it's a really important bit of understanding to understand the later content in this talk about what AI is really good at in terms of social value and what it's really bad at. All of it can be really explained by the fact that AI has learned from a huge amount of information that's out there on the internet to do one very simple trick: play a guessing game about what the next most likely word is in a sentence or in response to a question. Okay, we'll explain that more in depth. But what does all this technical HOCA mean for social value? Well, we've been doing a bit of thinking here, the team at Impact Reporting, about what developments in AI are actually going to mean in social value. We've prepared a kind of a look into the near future, really, about what it might be like to be in social value or be a social value practitioner in the near future. So this timeline here is what we think is likely to happen and how the impacts of AI are likely to play out in terms of social value. So I think the first thing that we're going to see, as we see with any kind of technological development, the wave of change kind of flows through and usually hits stuff about money first, right? So the thing that we're going to see first, I think, is AI being used in bidding and procurement. And I imagine you've already started to see that in your organizations. I think next up, and we're already starting to see this as well, we're seeing AI being used by individual social value practitioners. So what I mean by that is you're probably logging into something like ChatGPT and you're asking for help writing an email or a report or something like that, which is great. Next up, I think, and the thing that we've not really seen yet, is AI being used to enhance social value delivery. And we'll look at some examples of that later. Perhaps social value being considered as part of procuring AI. So are we actually buying AI services from companies that are socially valuable themselves or ethical themselves? We're probably then going to see AI training or delivery as a form of social value that we can create. So instead of perhaps doing so many STEM classes with young people in schools, we might be thinking about training people in AI in different communities in order to have a social impact on them. Then we think it's going to come down to AI innovation, making new forms of social value possible. And again, I'll show you some examples of that in a bit, but there are new ways we can have social value thanks to AI. And lastly, the reporting frameworks will probably catch up and make a tick box value about AI that does absolutely nothing to represent what the value actually is, because that's just being in social value, isn't it? So what might working in social value look like soon thanks to AI? Let's look at some of that kind of earlier part of the timeline about how social value practitioners are using this and could use this stuff like right now and also into the near future. So we've prepared a bit of a deep dive into the future of social value for you. So let's head our way down the wormhole into the future. So step one in a lot of social value activity comes down to, oh, one sec, sorry, I think you might have lost my screen share. 1 second. And oh, there we go. I'm back. So stage one, a lot of social value starts with research and consultation exercises. And this is an area where I think AI can already make a huge impact, but only if we use it the right way. You might be thinking, Matt, can AI really be good at research? Because I used Google recently and it gave me an AI overview and it was inaccurate at best and utterly dodgy at worst. Well, yes, it can be, but again, you've got to learn to lean into AI's strengths. Remember that thing about AI being a word prediction machine? AI can sometimes just predict words that seem plausible and make it look like it knows what it's talking about when it actually doesn't. So we've got to kind of lean into that. One way to do that is actually, instead of leaning on the AI to kind of know or understand anything, you can give it a bunch of documents that you found from elsewhere and ask it to summarize them for you. And it does a much better, more accurate job of that. And there's actually a tool called Perplexity. Give us a shout out in the chat if you use Perplexity. And what that does is it basically pretty much just reads the first 10 results on Google for you and summarizes the information into a nice, easy to digest summary, as you can see on screen with this question that is on many people's search histories at the moment. If you want to get a little bit more sophisticated with that, and you've got a bit of a bigger problem to solve, which is like, what the hell is the Social Value Act and Procurement Act and all of these new frameworks that are being come out with, and what do we need to do? Then a more advanced tool that you might want to look into is Notebook LM. And I find this immensely useful in a number of contexts, actually. But you can see here, I've set up an example where I've dragged and dropped a bunch of documents into Notebook LM about the Social Value Act, the government social value model. And it will take web pages, it will take PDFs, it will take YouTube videos even. And what it does is it kind of reads them all. You can then ask it a question, as you can see I've done on screen, and it will answer that question, but only with respect to the documents that you've put into it, which means that it's much more likely to be accurate and also much more focused on the problem at hand and the thing that you're trying to read about and solve. One of the reasons that Notebook LM became quite popular is it has a bit of a party trick, and I hope the sound is going to share on this. Give me a thumbs up reaction if you can hear it. I'll play it in a second. Basically, it can generate a podcast of two kind of obsequious American podcast hosts interacting with each other, talking about the stuff that you've put in there. And I like to try and make it make enthusiastic podcasts about the some of the most boring things imaginable, as you can hear with this one. Hopefully, if it plays.
All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into a world you might not think is very exciting, but trust me, it is. We're talking about paint drying.
You heard right. Paint drying.
Yeah, we're going to cover how it happens.
Probably more exciting than the documents that I put in there, to be fair. So yeah, that's two powerful tools that you can use as social value practitioners already to start to get a grip with, all of the deluge of ever-changing information that we experience in this profession. Where we can get a little bit more specifically into a use case that is very helpful and very powerful in social value is around local needs analysis. Of course, all good social value activity starts with a real understanding, often a place-based understanding of the needs of the stakeholders in that area. And as we'll see as we go through this is one of the areas where AI poses the most risk to social value practitioners, is that actually we use it as a substitute for thinking that we need to learn about our stakeholders or talk to human beings. But actually, AI can be a useful starting point for that. So you might not have tried this, but it's something to check out. If you're perhaps bidding for some work in a particular area, or you're thinking of doing some social value in a particular place, then you can ask for AI to write you a little report about what some of the local needs are in that place. So you can see here that it's fairly adept at doing that. One of the things that we found is that sometimes some of the very detailed facts can be kind of hallucinated. That is, it can make little mistakes or make misunderstandings about what it's learned. But to me, it's kind of quite good at kind of two different ends of local needs analysis. It's quite good at sort of searching for textual information online, like news stories and social media posts, and weaving those into the local needs analysis, which is quite cool. It's not just relying on kind of the ONS data. And it's also very good at kind of crafting summaries that kind of link together themes in that information into sort of very clear, suggested kind of interventions or problems in those areas. Where I think it's kind of lacking, and this will be a theme in this talk probably, is like the meaty bit in the middle, like understanding and leaning on really high quality general data sets that we have to understand needs. Tools like the indices of multiple deprivation, the ONS understanding society data. For whatever reason, it's not it doesn't go to that and analyze it. It often just consumes kind of write-ups and things that people have already written online about a local area. So you do just have to be careful. It's not just kind of regurgitating stuff. If you want to find those deep insights, obviously better to go to those primary sources yourself, or even better, speak to stakeholders. We've solved some of those problems with AI-based local need analysis in our impact tool, which some companies use to perform these local needs analysis steps, because we're actually merging some of that data that I talked about, those kind of really good data sets, with some of its strengths in terms of pulling in some of that textual data. And we find that we can kind of get the best of both worlds. So yeah, this AI-driven local needs analysis tool is a feature in our impact reporting platform. And if you want a demo about it, feel free to give us a heads up. I think this kind of helps illustrate something that I just find an incredibly useful kind of mental metaphor to think of when I'm using one of these AI tools like ChatGPT, is that these large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini are to language what a calculator is to numbers. And that means they can be really brilliant at helping us understand large quantities of text information, but can be a bit ropey when it comes to trying to process numbers, because they're thinking more linguistically rather than numerically. And I think this opens up one of the most powerful areas for AI to help in social value, which is just helping us crunch like a large amount of information about stakeholders and their needs that might not be readily available in nicely predefined kind of data sets and kind of numeric format. So what do I mean? Impact, we've done various projects where we've looked to appraise the impact of different initiatives on communities. We're undertaking a project in London, doing just that right now, and I undertook one of these projects in the Scottish Highlands relatively recently. And what we found is that actually just using the recorder on our phone, we were able to record lots of interviews with both groups of stakeholders and individual stakeholders. Now, this generated about 90,000 words worth of text, which would have taken quite a long time to transcribe and code and appraise. But we were able to, I suppose, A, transcribe the audio into text using AI, and B, we were able to use AI to try and analyze that text to be able to extract common themes and areas of impact in a way that we just wouldn't have had the time to do otherwise. So that's one amazing use of AI in social value, and I'll show you some more concrete examples of that later. We are able even to bridge language gaps in some of that stakeholder consultation as well. So just check out this very futuristic use of AI here. This is something that's available today using a service called Doubly. And if you want to reach non-English speaking audiences, you can even use AI to translate the content into these languages without needing to record new videos. So here is me saying that same thing in Arabic, which is a language I don't know and I have never studied.
للانتقال إلى المجتمعات غير الناطقة بالإنجليزية، استخدم الذكاء الاصطناعي لترجمة المحتوى دون تسجيل مقاطع فيديو جديدة.
And like, there's some mind-blowing things in this, right? One of which is it's actually changed my mouth movements to match what I would be doing if I was speaking Arabic. And the most mind-blowing thing to me is it's actually applied my Lancastrian accent over the top of it to make some kind of like weird Arabic Lancastrian accent, which is quite impressive. Another incredibly powerful use of social value when it comes to talking to stakeholders is the ability for us to visualize things that we might be talking about. That might actually be hard for our stakeholders to imagine instantly using AI. So let's say we had a kind of housing development. Perhaps it looks like this. This isn't a photograph. This is a picture I made using AI. And we have this big plot in the middle of it, and we've promised the local authority some kind of piece of social value, and we're consulting with stakeholders about what they might want or need. Imagine if in a few seconds we could have a social value consultation, and in a few seconds during that consultation we could bring the results of that consultation to life in terms of a visualization of what that playground might look like if it was in that community and looked the way people described, or what that community center and vegetable growing patch could look like if that was built instead, and actually edit and adapt these things based on the feedback that we were capturing from stakeholders in real time. That adds a real degree of richness to their feedback and deepens our understanding about what the likely social value impacts might be of doing those actual projects, instead of just taking some notes, going away and making those decisions on our own. And I think this is a really good example of something that I really strongly believe about AI, which is used in the right way, it can make us more human, not less. And I think, to me, that is the ultimate litmus test. Perhaps if you take nothing else from this presentation, just think, when I'm using this AI, am I actually doing something to free up more human time or create more human empathy or more human understanding, or am I trying to cut humans out of the picture? And I think that generally is a good steer for you. In the future, this is just starting to become possible. We will be able to realize full kind of 3D visualizations and 3D worlds based on what's happening in these stakeholder consultations as well. So I'm not sure any of us are probably going to create some kind of weird sci-fi ice planet as part of our social value work. But if we did, you could use a tool like Marble to visualize 3D worlds and actually take people around what that park might look like in 3D. So that's something very exciting on the near horizon. I think you will agree. In terms of stakeholder kind of research, this isn't sort of sci-fi stuff. This is stuff that's happening in the real world. So if you have a look at Wigan Council, who are just down the road from me in Manchester City Centre, they created an AI tool called QuickScrape, which gathers information about the local area, about things like bin collections and other kind of council relevant stuff off social media, and compiles it into a regular report to allow the local authority to get more real-time intelligence about what the impact of their services are on people on the ground. Maidstone Borough Council also didn't just use AI to kind of understand stakeholders' needs better, they're actually predicting it. So they piloted some AI which actually predicted which service users were at most at risk of experiencing homelessness. And that allowed them to put forward early intervention social value strategies to pull them out of that potential situation. So there's all sorts of ways that AI can be used to better research and understand our service users. But once you're done the research and you've done your local needs analysis and your stakeholder consultation, what next? Well, we're kind of planning some delivery, right? We're having to come up with some ideas about what social value activities or initiatives might make the most impact. And this is like a really simple thing, but it makes such a difference to me, is that ChatGPT has a voice mode. It works best, I think, on the phone rather than the desktop, but it works on both. And this is just like, I don't know, the most infinitely patient person. You can just blather on and on and on about boring social value strategies and frameworks to it for hours and hours and hours, and it never tires of you, right? And the great thing about that, other than potentially saving your marriage, is that you can just talk aloud at it about ideas that you might have, for social value activities, things you need to look up, things that could happen. And then you can ask it to output that as like a structured document or a plan. And I don't think that's necessarily the best way to decide what the social value activity should be on a project, but it really helps actually to get a lot of stuff out your head and get that kind of first starting point about what that might look like with some organization. It's especially powerful for people that have been through that stakeholder consultation process, that have just soaked in so much knowledge from talking to stakeholders and reading local needs analysis reports, that this can be a really powerful way to help them get that out and get it onto paper. As I said earlier, procurement, kind of bid writing is the area where we're seeing AI make its earliest impact in terms of social value. So, we're already, I've spoken to social value practitioners that have used AI to generate the responses to the social value question in bids. That's happening right now today, and you can see an example of that there. Those are both two documents I created entirely with AI. Those logos were created entirely with AI, so it shows you how easily this is to do. Easy this is to do. I did this in a matter of minutes. But I think what's interesting to us is less about, spamming out a load of AI slop in a proposal, which frankly is often generic. It often doesn't respond to the needs of stakeholders in that area, unless you use some of our advanced tips later on. But is that you can use AI to mark your homework, perhaps giving the request for proposal document or the invitation to write a social value statement, passing that into AI along with your response can give you an instant kind of, I guess, somewhat impartial score of how that bid looks. And I think this is probably the more powerful, more ethical use of this technology. You can see what that scoring might look like, and you can see in this instance, Gemini picked up that I had deliberately omitted any social value section or information from this bid. So you can see the real applicability of this stuff. This creates quite a weird situation though, doesn't it? Because one thing I've noticed is it's not only people writing their social value answer to that bid in AI, but also the person reading it is often using AI to read a bunch of these bids and score them. So, like there does just feel to be like a bit of a moment where we're like, shall we just all like leave these computers to it and they can just like talk to each other and decide who's going to get this contract? Because, it seems a bit of a crazy kind of merry-go-round. But I think one thing we need to understand as social value practitioners is that the text that we write, particularly into bids, is very probably not going to be read by a human, first of all, but read by a robot, read by an AI. And that means it's important to write it with that in mind. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to go into kind of what that means, but just making sure that you use, the right keywords, making sure that you use ideally a kind of a question and answer style can make it easier for these robots to consume that information and score you more highly. So a top tip for you there. We then have the actual delivery of the social value activities that we've kind of planned and proposed. I think, an obvious way that AI can help us right away is in enhancing our existing social value offer. Almost everything we're doing in terms of social value could probably be enhanced if we think, how could AI kind of supercharge this? So I don't know, if you're rolling out kind of STEM classes to the local school, Like, how could that be improved with AI? Could you make I don't know, an online kind of STEM education tool using AI, or a STEM careers coach, which could, connect to those kids and help follow up with them and help coach them into a career in STEM rather than just leave it as a one-off activity. There's all sorts of things that we could come up with. I think the next logical step will actually be, instead of enhancing, say, as a random example, STEM training with AI, we'll think, helping people get access to AI and get the skills that they need to use AI effectively will probably end up being a really powerful way to deliver social value in the future, particularly if we're thinking about satisfying social value focuses around kind of employability and income inequality. So, that could be something to think about. If you've got a group of people in your organization using AI, is that something that they can share in terms of training for young people or SMEs or third sector organizations? And we're exploring what the social valuation of that activity might be as part of our Measure Up project as well. So do stay tuned if you are thinking of doing something like that. I think the other area where AI could make a huge difference is not necessarily just enhancing what we've already got, or us training about AI being the social value, but it could actually be delivering AI to organizations. If we've got a team that's been through this transformation, we've probably been through it earlier if we are, a large corporate organization or a more tech-focused organization. Do you have people within your organization, within the tech team or within the transformation team, if you have one, that could potentially go out to charities, NHS contexts, social enterprises, and help them to deploy AI, which makes a social impact? This is one example I found in use today. An organization called Tortoise helped Great Ormond Street Hospital deploy some transcription technology, which resulted in doctors looking at patients rather than their computers, which probably improves health outcomes. But also they reckoned if they rolled this out nationally, it could generate £834 million in NHS savings. Which, of course, NHS savings, that's a fiscal saving, that's social value straight off the cuff right there. One organization that's doing really fantastic things with AI and social value is State of Life. They're one of our good friend organizations. Really encourage you to check them out. And they've created a calculator which helps football clubs, small football clubs, to understand what the social value they're having is. And because it's such a richly complicated world, social value, they've actually embedded a little chat bot which you can ask social value questions to as you're filling in that calculator. And they've baked a lot of social value knowledge into that so that it can be adept at answering those. So there's an example of how, social value can be used for delivery as well. That segues us neatly on to the next stage, which is recording, measuring, and valuing the socially valuable activity that's going on. So to give you an example of how AI can really work here, let's say you got people to fill in kind of feedback forms or little kind of feedback cards as part of the delivery of what you were doing. Let's say it was kind of a coffee morning or something like that. Did you know that you can just take a photo of that with your phone and ask AI tools like ChatGPT to turn all that handwriting into text? And create a mini spreadsheet for you, including even analyzing whether the sentiment of that post-it note was positive, neutral, or negative. That's something you can do with ChatGPT. If you want to get more sophisticated with that, if you're looking at large amounts of survey data, check out what I was able to achieve with this tool called V7 Labs, which is kind of like an AI spreadsheet. I just find it so useful in processing social value measurement data. So what I've done is I've set up a little spreadsheet in the tool, and I've got a bunch of Word documents, which are all responses to a survey about a whole bunch of different social value activities that have been rolled out within a local community by a company. And I can drag and drop all of those documents into my little magic AI spreadsheet. And what I've asked the spreadsheet to tell me is which activities are being talked about in that survey response. Which is it a positive impact that we've had, a neutral one, or a negative one, judging from the text that's been written by the user? And this is all just like free text the user's written as well. They've not answered set questions. They've just given us like a tell us your thoughts kind of answer. Which outcomes seem to have been most impacted, if any? And can you give me a powerful quote from this that relates to that? And you'll see it takes it a little while to think about it, but once it catches up, it creates a spreadsheet, does all that work for me, which is pretty incredible. I think you'll agree. So what you might be thinking is, this is amazing, Matt. This AI stuff is absolutely wonderful. Can we just get AI to calculate all of our social value and then we can just like cancel our subscription to Tom's? Well, unfortunately, not. At least I don't think so. So it's possible, and I wanted to show you to save you the effort what might happen if you take one of the kind of questions that we sometimes get asked in our social value practice team. So let's say, hey, it's Catherine that leads that team, Catherine Manning. Hey, Catherine, we've done this smoking cessation intervention in Hull. I need to demonstrate as much social value as possible, and I need a monetized figure because the council's commissioning the work and they've asked for that. Can you create some kind of calculation that helps us get to that? Oh, it was with 30 people. Anyway, sorry, got to go now, bye. Now, obviously, this is not enough information to do this right. However, AI does empower people to ask these kind of questions and get answers. My favorite little weirdness of doing this was asking Meta AI for this question. And its first reply was the word blazing and then a little star-eyed emoji. So that's caused me to sort of categorize Meta AI as basically the David Brent of AI, since that seems to be like the kind of crap that it comes out with in response to lots of questions that I ask it. You can see here what the results were. I benchmarked that question across a bunch of different AIs. So you can see that Grok, the supposedly least woke of all the AIs, according to Elon Musk, gave us a highest social value score for smoking cessation at a rate of about 20 to 21 pounds of social value per pound invested. And Meta gave us the lowest at around £2. So you can see just by benchmarking these things that actually, no, we can't rely on AI to do monetized social value calculations for us or calculate the social impacts of our activities. There really is no substitute for doing that the right way, talking to stakeholders and not using AI that can kind of hallucinate answers. So what AI actually is meaning is it rather than replacing some of what we need as social value practitioners, it actually means more than ever, we need robust audit trailed reference records of our activity and our impact information, because we'll find that we will soon be in a fog of AI generated poor analysis and potentially, as we'll see in a bit, even falsified information. So it's really important that you have a really good database. Of course, I would be saying that because I want you all to buy a subscription to Impact Reporting, which does exactly this. However, you don't have to use Impact Reporting. Other tools are available, and even just a bloody good spreadsheet actually can do a lot of the work here if you really want to. So yeah, we call this in the trade a single point of truth. So, make sure you have one central place where you've got evidence of what your social value and your social value data is. And that's a great starting point for you then to process some of that evidence with AI, paying attention, as we'll see, of course, to data protection. I would also not recommend getting AI to come up with social value proxy values for you, because I've found that it tends to hallucinate or misunderstand the information that's out there. Try and rely on sources that are HM Treasury Green Book methodologically kind of in line. We developed a free and open one of those called Measure Up that you can check out at measure-up.org with a few other organizations that are passionate about this kind of this area. I think it's always better to use those because they've been checked and validated by actual economists rather than just come up with by an AI, which, as we can see, sometimes hallucinate. Lastly, the last stage that I'll just talk to you about is stage 6, which is about reporting and communication. This is an area where AI can be incredibly powerful. You can write reports based off information, but I actually just want to kind of skip that because I think it's a bit kind of passe. You're probably already doing stuff like that, and just talk about some other more interesting uses of it. So I saw a film recently called Welcome to Chechnya. Don't know if anybody saw it. Let me know if you did in the chat. And this film was about LGBTQ plus activists in Chechnya, who are, of course, violently persecuted there, sadly. And what it did was it filmed the individuals in Chechnya in their own setting without any attempt to anonymize them whatsoever. No shooting them from the back of the head or zooming into their mouth or garbling their voice or anything like that. And then they used AI, deepfake technology, to replace the face of the individual with a synthetic face so that it fully anonymized the individual, yet preserved the incredibly powerful connection that they had to that material. There's nothing like listening to that stuff in somebody's own words. And actually, if you're telling the story of vulnerable kind of service users about your social value impacts, this is a way you could preserve their anonymity whilst boosting the emotional appeal of that information. So that is just some of what we can do today with AI in social value. I wanted to just quickly move on to give you like a 500-mile-an-hour little quick tour about ethics and AI, because it's important as social value practitioners that we understand when it's right to use AI and when it's wrong to use it, and what some of the pitfalls that you can trip up into if you're not very careful. To do that, we need to just indulge me for 10 seconds, a little bit nerdy about ethics. What we find is that basically a lot of organizations decide what they do ethically or not with a deontological kind of framework. By that, I mean they have a series of values or principles that they try and stick to. And they think if we stick to those principles, we can do no wrong. The problem that you've got in applying those principles to AI to try and make it ethical is that actually a lot of the problems with AI are all about unintended consequences. And actually trying to stick to values doesn't necessarily avoid them. And that's really well illustrated by this trolley problem, that if you were to, it's kind of a thought experiment in ethics, that if you saw a train hurtling down the tracks to 5 people tied to one direction and 1 person tied to the other, and you could pull a lever to divert the train so it wouldn't kill those 5 people, it would kill the one instead, should you do it? Well, a deontological view would probably be something like it's wrong to break the law. You shouldn't interfere with network rail material and divert the path of trains. That's not allowed. Whereas a consequentialist one would say, hell yes, pull the lever and minimize harm. Just as an aside, by the way, I ripped this image off the internet and I didn't notice when I first found it that actually somebody had looped the end, so everybody dies anyway. I was going to replace it, but I thought, oh, maybe there's a hidden message about AI in there, and I will leave it in. If you, like me, enjoy getting nerdy about ethics, there's a really good book about ethics in technology and biotech that you can read by Susan Leotold called The Power of Ethics. If you've already got too much to read, here is the one paragraph that I think is important to you. Susan talks about an ethical edge, which is the line where the law no longer guides and protects us, and leaving ethics as the lone standard by which to gauge our behavior. And that's where we are in social value with AI. None of the institutes are giving us any kind of guidance yet about ethical uses of it or not. There's not a lot of regulation about it, or companies often don't have like well fleshed out policies about it. So we've got to decide. Thankfully, there are people out there that have done some of that digesting for us and come up with a bit of thinking about what some of the principles we might want to adopt. So here's a very simple 5-principle approach that you can use to think about your use of AI and whether it's ethical in a social value context. The first principle is beneficence. Does using the AI make the world better or someone's life better? That's something we should be all pretty expert in social value, of course, knowing a lot as we do about well-being. Non-maleficence, i.e. do no harm. Are we doing any harm by our use of AI? Does the use of AI advance the cause of justice, or does it actually take it away? Like, it's unjust for us to discard a load of feedback from stakeholders or make one stakeholder's voice louder than the other by utilizing AI in a poor way, for example. Autonomy, are we helping people have more autonomy and more say in their lives, like we could be doing with some of the stakeholder consultation stuff I showed earlier? Or are we actually diminishing it by taking decisions out of their hand and making it with AI tools instead? And lastly, if somebody comes to us and say, why did you build a playground instead of a community centre in the middle of this social housing estate? It's probably better to have an answer that is like, oh, because we did a really in-depth community consultation and we actually used AI to analyze that and visualize it and really get more in depth with people's needs, than going, I don't know, I asked ChatGPT what we should make and it just spat out that. So whoops. So that's why explicability is important. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of a tour of some of the AI pitfalls that you can fall into. You'll find that there are lots of examples out there, if you know what to look for, of spotting some of these pitfalls in action in the real world. One of my favorite ones recently was this news article in a Pakistani newspaper that left the chat GPT like rubbish in at the end, saying like, oh, if you like, I can create you a snappier front page style version of this article. And they just printed that in the newspaper. It was amazing. So yeah, very quickly, here's some things you need to understand if you're going to use AI in social value. AI can be biased, as the image on screen shows you right now, but that is very contextual. And actually, if you were to do the same experiment and use an image generator and ask for, say, practitioners, a bad social value practitioner or a bad charity leader and a good social value practitioner or a good charity leader or something like that, you find that the bias is reversed. And that's because AI only knows what it's been trained on, okay? And context really matters. You can also get hallucinations where AI just comes up with nonsense information. Like this budget supermarket had a recipe creator on their website to try and deliver a social value initiative that they had to avoid food waste amongst their customers. And one customer asked it what they should do if all they have in their cupboard is ammonia and bleach. And it suggested mixing the two together, which would, of course, create a toxic gas. The recipe recommended that they served it chilled and enjoyed the refreshing fragrance. Misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, all different kinds of poor quality information, can easily be spat out by AI, which is why it's really important to check the outputs of it, especially if you're relying on it to generate reports or emails that are going to be published. Check out Microsoft Travel that leans on AI in order to generate loads of its travel content. They said that the third most popular tourist attraction in Ottawa was the Ottawa Food Bank. And it said, life is already difficult enough without having to pay for food. Make sure you go there on an empty stomach. So, what we don't want is these kind of howlers in our social impact reports for our companies. One of the most horrifying examples of disinformation and malinformation is the way that it can be used to intervene in our political system and scam us, particularly with deepfakes. And I didn't want to kind of put information about that in instead. So I thought I would horrify you with this deep fake of a nightclub from the 1980s inhabited entirely by Gordon Ramsay, just to illustrate the terrifying ethical damage that this technique can cause. I'm very sorry for doing this to you. I think I've actually generated negative social value as a result of this presentation, as a result of this video. I'm so sorry. If that doesn't make you want to feel cautious about using AI, then I don't know what will. But as well as forging nightclub scenes with Gordon Ramsay, it can also be used to forge data at scale. So actually, if you've got suppliers in your supply chain giving you lots of information about, I don't know, apprentices that they've supposedly hired or delivered, one thing to note is that actually it is possible to generate very plausible looking fake social value data in a matter of seconds. So we do, it does show the importance of actually double checking and auditing. Here's an example of us doing this in Gemini. Took literally seconds. Jailbreaking is another issue that you need to be aware of. If you're going to deploy social value as part of your, if you're going to deploy AI as part of your social value initiatives, just bear in mind, if you put AI in the hands of, say, a young person, they're going to find ways to break it. Okay, so this is one of my favorite examples from DPD, where somebody managed to use very clever prompts to convince it to write a haiku about how useless DPD are. Now, that would have only affected this one chat with this one customer, but you can see some of the negative consequences of deploying AI and putting it into customers' hands or stakeholders' hands unchecked, which is why I really recommend that social value practitioners use it behind the scenes rather than front of house. Yeah. Another thing, obviously, to watch out for is that you're not just dragging and dropping service user or stakeholder sensitive data into AI. The ICO has great guidance on this, which you can look up online on their website. And also, I really strongly recommend that if you're using an AI tool, you go into the settings and you turn the setting off that says, improve the model for everybody, or allow us to train our AI on the data you provide. Otherwise, the information that you're giving to that AI will be stored indefinitely and used to train future versions of that AI, which is something that ethically we probably don't want, particularly if we're talking about, really important kind of issues that matter to kind of stakeholders that we've got from community consultations. If you want to be really cautious, it's actually possible with a bit of technical boffinery to run some of these AI tools on your computer and not use a website for them at all, which means that sensitive data never leaves your laptop. And if you're going to be analyzing, sensitive stakeholder information, as we do sometimes, that's how we do it in a way to guarantee the privacy of it and to do it in an ethical way. No talk about AI ethics would be remiss without talking about the fact that it's a little bit rubbish for the environment, to say the least. But what's quite interesting is it's the training of these AI models by these big companies that actually generates the most horrendous amount of water usage and carbon emissions. So you can see here that training an AI model is something like 5 times as carbon emittive as a car in the US being manufactured and the fuel used to power that car for the lifetime of that vehicle. It's kind of horrifying, really, isn't it? However, AI is probably less carbon emissive than you at producing documentation or images. It takes more carbon will be emitted by your computer writing that bid submission than will be by, say, ChatGPT writing it instead. So that was an interesting nuance with this information. But yeah, generally, let's be responsible in our use of AI environmentally. Labor conditions is also something we should consider as when we're interested in, obviously, social value being generated in our supply chain. We don't want to put an AI company in our supply chain that uses dodgy labor practices, like getting low-paid workers overseas to clean up AI content in digital sweatshops. So do always do your due diligence with your AI supplier, just like you would with any other form of supplier. Explainability I mentioned, so I'm just going to highlight the fact that whilst being able to explain how you're using AI is important, also, if you're using AI to make decisions, say about what happens within communities, always make sure that it can be contested, that decision as well. And the last one, the last ethical issue, is that bear in mind AI can empower bad people to do more bad things. And this is something that we might have to consider as part of our social value strategies, is mopping up some of the mess that is created by AI, as it perhaps makes society's income inequality worse, as it causes more damage to the environment, and as perhaps bad actors use it to do harmful things at scale. One thing I'm thinking of is potentially kind of money-related scams, which are kind of supercharged by AI. So if you're, say, a social housing provider and you support your tenants with money matters, that's something you need to be aware of right away. Just to try and not end my ethics session on doom and gloom, I wanted to talk to you about a project that I was involved in, which I'm really proud of, which is where we worked with Age UK and some social value contribution from Credit Suisse. They gave us 2 days of their data science team's time. And we worked with Reason Digital, which is the social enterprise that I also co-founded. And we drew that together into a project that automatically safeguards all of the volunteer befriending phone calls that get made through Age UK's call in time scheme. And I wanted to highlight this is because it can feel really terrifying when you look at the ethics of AI. You can think like, oh my God, this is so bad and so harmful. We should absolutely not touch it. It is possible to use AI to empower good people as well as bad people. And I know we have over 100 of you good, lovely people on the call that I would love to be empowered by this. Of course, Age UK doesn't just trust that safeguarding AI to do all the safeguarding for it. It's safeguarding human beings to check the results of that AI, to do spot checks on calls. They check the first call made by every new volunteer, things like that. And what that is called is keeping a human in the loop. And it's my main ethical recommendation for you. Whenever you're deploying AI, always make sure that you've got a human being in the loop checking stuff before it goes out and is put live. So our last little segment is we're just going to give you 5 or 6 top tips for making effective use of AI. I've got my kind of social value kind of hat on with these, but actually these are just sort of general tips that people who are very clever at using AI, we work with quite a lot of them at Impact and Reason Digital, seem things that they do differently versus your average user to get more accurate results with less hallucinations that are going to do the job better for you. So I think the first thing to just like realize with AI is you're probably going to need to get better at writing prompts to AI than you are at writing English or whichever language you wish to write in. That's because AI can have such a multiplicatory effect on the amount of work that you can get done that actually prompt writing becomes perhaps more of an important skill than English or maths in the near future society, which again is why I was recommending potentially training people in AI is a potentially fantastic social value activity. If you this process of really creating great prompts is called prompt engineering, and it's something that you might want to Google and get some tips on. A very quick one for you though is to think about using prompt engineering frameworks, which is just like a little pattern of typing your prompt out to make sure that you include all the things that a good prompt should have. One of my favorites is RTF, which is where you would say to the AI, imagine that you are a social value practitioner writing an agenda for a stakeholder consultation session, and then you write the task. So I've kind of done that, write the agenda and the format. I wanted as a single A4 page that is easily readable by a stakeholder and doesn't contain any technical language and is in British English. And if you kind of structure it like that, you'll get much better results. And crucially, from an ethical perspective, you'll get those results first time, which means that you won't have to keep going back to the AI and doing loads of extra prompts and wasting loads more kind of energy and water doing it. If you want to get more sophisticated, if you think like, yeah, Matt, I know, I've done trial and error with prompts before. Yeah, tell me something new. Well, context engineering is the thing that you should Google. So what context engineering is it's just what you need to understand about it is that when you type something into an AI like ChatGPT, it doesn't just get what you've typed. It gets a load of other hidden stuff that you didn't give it. And that stuff often has a bigger bearing on the quality of the output than what you actually type in. So we call this process of understanding that context engineering. And what I really recommend is that when you type a prompt into AI, you don't just type a prompt. What works better is if you perhaps ask the AI a few questions first. Things like, I don't know, what makes a great social value stakeholder consultation event? What makes a really engaging stakeholder consultation, things like that. And its responses, all of your chat history, get fed into that context. So every time you ask a new question, the AI is getting smarter and smarter because it's using the answers to those prior questions to inform what it's creating. So that can be really powerful. You can also attach files as well. And one little trick for you that I really like to use is I have a bunch of files on my desktop, which I call context documents. And they are just documents that have just a load of like brain dumped information about my organizational context. So like, I don't know, if you work for a construction company, it might have the name of the construction company, how big you are, the kind of projects you do, what your corporate mission, vision, and values is, the kind of language you tend to use. And then what I can do is I can just drag and drop this document into the prompt and then just type my prompt. And I get such more contextually specific, relevant outputs from it without needing to constantly go back and forth. So that's a really top tip for you. If you want to take it even further, I'll just show you how the different kind of workflows of people that use AI for a living differ to what everyday people's use of AI is, because I think you'll take one or two really powerful things from this. So the way that most people kind of work with AI is that they write a prompt, they get an output like an answer to their question or a document or a picture, and then maybe they publish that, they email it on, or they put it on their website or whatever. What our users do, people that are better at this, load context into the AI. So we just talked about that. They add that context document or ask the AI a few warm-up questions first. They then ask the main prompt they want to ask, write me that document. They get an output, and that output is often disappointing. So what you'll find they do is they then reprompt. They ask for changes to that document. They give the AI even more instruction, and they do that a few times and keep going and don't give up until they get something that they're happy with. And then usually it's only 90% of the way there at best. So power users are also adept at downloading that information, say into a Word document, and then finishing it and finessing it and doing that last 10% before they publish it. A lot of people get really disheartened using AI, that they try a prompt, it doesn't work very well, and then they think, this AI stuff, it's all overhyped, it's a lot of crap, I'm not going to use it. Whereas actually, if you use this process, you'll really start to see the power of AI. My last tip for you is to use AI to mark its own homework. And I think this is particularly valuable in kind of social value, if you're doing kind of analyses or if you're asking for research about particular topics. There is nothing that some of these AIs love better than criticizing what another AI has done, right? So you can leverage that to your advantage. Cut and paste the response from ChatGPT into an AI like Claude. Claude is my favorite AI, by the way. I use it mostly rather than ChatGPT. So you might want to check it out. And I could say to Claude, I just got this information from ChatGPT. I think it's probably wrong in a few areas. Could you do some Googling and fact check this information for me? And you can see here that that social value data that I asked for about smoking cessation, it's already found a load of problems with it just by asking it for it to be fact checked by another AI. Of course, the right thing to do is fact check it as a human being first, if you can. But this is a great kind of step in that process. And just one last kind of advanced example on top of that for you, which is bear in mind that LLMs, AIs, can write code, not just text. So if you're really stuck with that annoying Excel problem, analyzing some social value data or survey responses, ask AI to write you what the Excel formula is. It does it in a few seconds, and you can just cut and paste it, and it makes you, if that's going to save 2 to 3 hours of your day that you could go out and instead use it to talk to stakeholders or daydream about a new social value initiative. Surely that is a better use of human time and energy than Excel formulas. If you want, you can get really sophisticated with this, with the latest generation of tools, and ask it not just to write you an Excel formula, but you can ask it to code you particular kind of interactive things even. So here's me, I've asked Claude to write me a really clever survey tool, which allows users to prioritize potential social value outcomes in between things that they know the price of in order to come up with a kind of estimated social valuation of that thing, doing something called a value game. I made that happen in 30 seconds. How crazy is that? So if you're a power user with these tools, it can really go a long way. So there's some key takeaways on the screen for you. I'm not going to read them all out. I'm going to leave them up for a few seconds so you can take a screenshot of them if you want to take these away, if you haven't been taking notes. Everybody got it? We will be sharing the recording of this as well. So if you don't manage to catch them, you'll be able to see them there. But I think that top tip, number 10, remember your stakeholders live in an AI-driven world. What new social value needs and opportunities does this create for them? If you only take away one thing, I think it's ponder about that. And in an even greater amount of summary, human beings plus a really good, robust, solid kind of set of evidence about what the social value activities you're doing are that's collected from real stakeholders plus AI is the right approach for social value. What isn't the right approach for social value is just outsourcing it all to AI. And I hope that's something that's come across in my talk today. So that is all I have time for. I appreciate that was a very quick tour through the world of AI and social value, but I hope you found some things in there useful. I am going to stick around and answer some questions. So if any of you have some questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And I can take some of those for you now. Stop sharing so you can see me as well. Perhaps you've already been using the chat.
Matt?
Yes.
There's been loads in the chat. So I'm just going to, excuse me. Well, lots of people saying brilliant section and really engaging. So thank you. Paul from Growth Company says, if suppliers are reporting to a contractor with data on local employees, apprentices, is there anything the contractor can do to check if it's false data before they submit this to a measurement portal?
Sadly not, because AI I mean, it is possible. There are some tells of AI generated information, but it's easy to strip those out. And actually AI is getting even more sophisticated at mimicking human beings. So even if you found a way to check it, I mean, the easy one I think with ChatGPT is that often the text has an M dash in it, a really long dash, which you don't have a button for on your keyboard, but is actually, the grammatically correct thing to do. Soon, like that won't be a tell because ChatGPT will learn to mimic humans better and stop using that. So yeah, bear that in mind. Unfortunately, you need to use your good old-fashioned detective work and maybe ask to contact some of those stakeholders or see some other evidence.
Yeah. Let's see another one. Sally's been asking quite a lot around the AI guidance. And I know we've looked at this as well, but do we have any signposts or recommendations or anyone that's done a really good AI policy that you would recommend to people?
I haven't seen one that's social value specific, actually. Reason Digital has a really good document, and I can say that because I had no part in creating it. That is available on their website, but I'll also share it in the chat, or I think Ed is around in the chat who might have access to that document. I don't know if Ed, if you could drag and drop our little Reason Digital's kind of views on AI document, but I think that's a really good template if you want to develop one of your own and learn from one that's had a lot of thought put into it.
Yeah, maybe something we help work on. Was it Magic Notes, one of the things that you had shared? I don't actually remember what that one was. The mind mapping, I think.
Magic Notes, I think, is a product that's available from an organization whose name I forget. So I am secretly Googling in the background, and you definitely can't hear my keyboard going. So Magic Notes is, a company called Beam. Sorry. That is a tool for social workers to transcribe notes from sessions. It looks quite similar to the healthcare example that I gave, so they might be thinking of that. But that could be a term that you might use for, transcribing an interview with a stakeholder, say, and then recording an interview with a stakeholder and asking AI to transcribe it and write summaries. That kind of magic note-taking capability is what some people call that.
Yes. I think those are it. The rest of them you covered later on.
Great.
So I'm going to end this for everyone unless anyone has any other questions you want to ask Matt. Otherwise, feel free to connect with Matt on LinkedIn or send us an email. We're always here to help, and I hope you found this webinar so helpful.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Bye.